Lee Blessing, and I'm talking with Dave on Dave's Gone By at UNC Radio.
Welcome back to Dave's Gone By. Always fun for me to talk to fellow writers, people who toil in the fields of, well, used to be typewriters, then word processors, and now computers, and gosh knows, maybe they're doing writing now on little iPads and things. But someone who's been doing it for a while and was even Tony-nominated and Pulitzer-nominated is Lee Blessing. He's probably still best known for A Walk in the Woods, but some of his other plays include Eleemosynary and Fortinbras and Down the Road and Going to St. Ives, and he has a brand new play being done by the Project Y Theater Company off-Broadway at Atlantic Theater on 16th Street. Check out this title, folks. It's called A User's Guide to Hell, featuring Bernard Madoff. Well, Lee Blessing, first of all, welcome, Lee.
Thank you very much.
Now, just tell us right away, is the play the title? What is your play?
The play is the title. It's a full-length play, a chance for us to get out for an evening and go to hell and see what it seems to be comprised of, using visits that most people, I guess, assume is potentially likely by Bernard Madoff. When one wants to explore hell and you need to send somebody there, you have to come up with a personage that we generally think if there is a hell, he's probably going. So that's one of the reasons, anyway, that I chose to center the play around Bernie.
So he serves as kind of a Dante figure. He takes you through the rungs of hell. He's sort of our guide.
Like Dante, he finds himself in hell. He didn't expect to be there. He didn't think there was one.
Oh.
But lo and behold, there it is. And, of course, he's not the guide. He's the person who experiences it. But just as Dante had Virgil, oddly enough, Bernie stumbles into a fellow named Burge, who performs that function.
Now, is it the kind of thing where the first thing that would spring to mind, is, especially if I were doing like a Saturday Night Live sketch, is, okay, he meets Hitler, he meets Stalin, he goes another rung, he meets, I don't know, who's a dead mass murderer, Chicago nurse murderer Richard Speck, or you don't go there?
Well, actually, he does meet one or two well-known evil people. He also meets some, lesser-known, unknown evil people who have nevertheless done evil things or been the victims of evil things, suicide. He meets the sorts of people, spirits you might find in hell, either permanently or briefly.
Well, wait, I'm going to stop you there for a moment, because when you say suicides that he meets in hell, I mean, obviously your feelings and your themes are going to infuse this play. Are you saying that, I don't want to box you in a corner, but are you saying that people who are suicidal, that's where they go? Or are these people who committed suicide because they did something really horrible?
No, it's Catholic dogma that people who commit suicide go to hell, or don't go to heaven, at very least. So the irony, of course, is that Bernie, who is Jewish, doesn't expect there to be a hell at all, but when he does get there, for some reason, whether or not we're in a literal hell or a hell of his imagination or whatever, it seems to be modeled more on Dante's vision of hell, a Catholic version of hell, than anything else, which, of course, has sort of been the dominant image of hell that Western civilization has held ever since the 14th century. So
you're basically taking your springboard, using the Dante template, as it were. It's not as if you're writing this play and agreeing with the idea that just because someone kills themselves, they don't go to heaven. Or are you ingrained with Catholic doctrine on some level, and a little part of you was taught in Sunday school that that's the truth?
Not at all, nor was I raised Catholic, but one has to observe that when, in general, Americans and other Westerners talk about hell, they tend to image the hell that Dante created, his Inferno, and that's simply sort of the structure of it. One of the points of satire of the play is that it's almost impossible for us, in any believable way, to conceive either heaven or hell, or whatever might be waiting after the point of death.
Well, I can conceive hell. It's the Department of Motor Vehicles, but I hope it doesn't give the play away. But I'm curious in the set design of the show that they're doing for Project Y Theater Company. Is it flames? Is it red velvet curtains? Or is that too, I wouldn't say literal, but literal according to Dante and what everybody has sort of been taught to believe?
It's of course, then unfortunately for the play, it's a highly abstracted set with a lot of moving panels. It's nothing terribly literal. It's
okay.
like a typical carnival or sideshow illustration of hell that you might find at the State Fair or something like that.
Okay, as opposed to, Sartre's version, which is just a nice room with a vase of flowers in it.
Exactly, yeah. So, obviously, one of the nice things about trying to set a play in hell is that you sort of open up the scenic possibilities. It can be anything we can see.
What made you, it's an obvious question, but what gave you the idea that, oh my gosh, there's a play in the Bernie Madoff thing? Because there's a zillion things that happen in the news every day. Killers, frauds, Ponzi schemers, wars, but this particular idea clicked with you. What was the genesis of it?
Bernard Madoff was a very large story, in part because of how much money was in that Ponzi scheme. I think the estimates were at $65 billion, I think, at the highest. That's a tremendous amount of money, and a lot of the people who were taken in that Ponzi scheme were very well-known and very wealthy people.
Sure. The New York Mets almost folded because of it, yeah.
Bernie's style, which was always pretend he didn't want to let people in, and then finally, after they begged enough, taking their money, the fact that he was Jewish and preyed as much upon other Jews as anybody else.
Oh, sure.
So I think there was a sense of real betrayal in New York, and of course he had risen very high in the ranks of Wall Street money types and held various positions and had been widely trusted, by all sorts of people. And the Ponzi scheme naturally tends to extend and extend. So he was hurting big fish and little fish equally. He seemed to have no sense of conscience about it whatsoever.
Well, I always think that if there ever is a kind of defense for what he did, I would just imagine that he thought he could spin the wheel forever. He always thought he could borrow from Peter to pay Paul.
That in a sense, any Ponzi schemer makes, and of course, they always tend to live in denial and believe that will, go on much longer than it typically does.
Right, and but I don't think they're going to hurt anybody ultimately, so long as they keep getting away with it. The person who invests $500,000 and then says, where's my money, and then he goes and borrows and he gives them back $600,000, he's not hurting. He probably thinks in his mind, oh, they win, I win. But at some point,
and certainly, going into a Ponzi scheme, there's a bit of an assurance, if it goes well, that the people that you meet in the first third or so of the time you're running the scheme will make their money back, in fact, make money.
Right.
But the longer it goes, the worse it gets for everybody involved, for all the new people. I think the thing that made me interested in writing about Bernard Madoff in this particular scandal was that people were so shaken by it. They were so angry. They were so upset, and at least one person killed himself. And then later, of course, his own son
killed him. Right. Yeah.
So there was just tremendous passions whipped up by this. But I was struck by a random comment that I heard reported in the news, which was that somebody said, "This is the worst crime ever committed in America." And I thought, wow, that's disputable.
Yes.
I can understand why a person would feel that passionately, and yet it just didn't make any sense. So it started making me wonder about other crimes, the nature of crimes, the nature of punishment, how we think about the afterlife as some sort of way to get back at people who do terrible things and aren't punished in life, sort of the essential childishness of that need we have, emotional need we have to, get us through our own days. How hell functions in a sense in our own emotional life was, to me, sort of an interesting theme.
Now, the other thing about writing a play about someone like Bernard Madoff, you didn't write a musical, but you did write, I assume it's a satirical comedy on some level. I think
somebody's already called it a black comedy.
Well, okay, fine.
Actually.
But it's like with Mama Rose
Review article.
or someone like that. The playwright on some level has to love the bad guy to write it. So the actor can also love that character who ends up playing Bernie Madoff. Were you able to find a nook that makes him fascinating and in some ways likable or even lovable, even though he did a monstrous thing?
Well, I wouldn't want to hug him the way I'd like to hug Barney.
Oh, I wouldn't want to hug Barney. Ew, but yeah.
Well, Barney's kind of scary too. But no.
Maybe Chica the chicken on Sprouts. Her I hugged, but not Barney.
The minute you try to write a character three-dimensionally, you know, obviously you're seeing his faults, but you're also, by the very nature of the process, you're seeing who they are, how they worked, what they thought of themselves, what the process of the events of their lives and the decisions they made might have been, and how it might have come to be. And you're right, you have to do that so that you have a three-dimensional character and the actor can find his own justification for, if you're playing Jack the Ripper, you need to be able to find some sort of emotional or psychological justification for who you are and how you do things.
Well, in the writing and the editing of User's Guide to Hell, and then hopefully being able to extrapolate into, you know, the dozen, 2 or 3 dozen plays that you've written at this point, or maybe it's even more. When you started it physically, not just the thinking part, how much was in your head? How far along were you? Did you have an ending? Did you start with the ending? Did you discover the plot as you went along? I'm curious how much pre-work you do, and where you are when you first start, and how that goes.
I think when I was getting my MFA in playwriting, my mentor was always sitting there saying, you know, you really should know the climax of a play before you begin writing it. While I always agree with that in theory, I've never been able to do it. So typically I will start writing towards an end, towards a direction I think will provide an effective climax. And very often as I write the play, somewhere in the writing of the play, somewhere in the middle of what I'm doing, I realize, oh yes, that's where it should go. That's the direction that will make it the most effective. I recall that happened in this play as well. But I didn't absolutely know what the culmination of the play was going to be before I was well into it.
Huh. Do you do an outline before you start, or you just do Act 1, Scene 1? Or I think it's a one act, but...
I don't do an outline. I usually think through a play at least up to a point. I do a lot of thinking about a play, often for years before I'll start writing it. So in a sense, I've lived with a play. But in terms of the specific plot, often that will reveal itself to me while I'm writing. I think it's something that you can get away with in playwriting because there's really never much of a deadline. I think in other dramatic forms, it's much harder to do it that way.
Wow. I don't remember, and I could be totally mistaking this, I interviewed Tina Howe many years ago, and I think she was the one, I could be wrong about this, who sometimes would put pictures of either cartoons or even actors or something, and use those as kind of guideposts while she was writing. She'd actually have the photos around her work table. That would help her with character. You ever done that, or would that be helpful, not helpful, or you keep using
No, I think a lot of people do that. I don't happen to. My wife, who is also a playwright and a television writer, Melanie Marnage, does do that. So I'll walk into her office and suddenly I'll see a whole array of photos that I haven't seen before. This sorts of people or that sort of people.
Do you write with particular voices in your head? I mean, the production you're doing now is Project Y Theater Company. It's not, I don't think there's anybody in it people will have heard of. It's not a Broadway production with stars, so to speak. But when you're writing, do you ever have an actor in mind, even if that actor is not going to be involved in the piece?
Pretty rarely. Oddly enough, in this play, while I was writing the role of Verge, the first surprise for Bernie is that Hell looks exactly like Manhattan. So, with a few key changes. So, his guide happens to be a very New York kind of guy, kind of working class. And so, my image for him was somebody like an actor nobody knows, named Ernie Sabella. He was in maybe... I remember now, he might have been in the Selma Funny Thing or something like that. The fellow that they cast is just wonderful. His name is David Deblinger, and he's this classic New York guy, So I couldn't be happier, actually, with the casting.
Now, here's the other thing, as a fellow playwright that I'm curious about, especially with your years and your track record and the fact that you've been on Broadway. And so you wrote this play just because you wanted to write it. You didn't have a commission or anything. It wasn't somebody who was asking you to write this play. You wanted to write it. Now you had it. You handed it to your agent, or what? How did the production come about?
I have certainly done lots of plays on commission. I'm doing one right now for a four-year liberal arts college in the Midwest. But This one it's completely on spec, and I sent it around a couple of places. Among the people who read it were the people at Project Y. I've known a number of them for a long time because I taught graduate playwriting for a dozen years at Rutgers University, and a couple of them had gone through the program, not in writing, but in directing and
Sure.
acting. So when they came to me, I thought, well, this is a plucky young group of people I already know are talented because I saw them working through their way through grad school. And I thought, this might be a very nice way to do the play. So then I discovered they wanted to do it in the perfect location. They're doing it in the second space of the Atlantic Theater in Chelsea, the Chelsea neighborhood of Manhattan. Mm-hmm. And the great thing about that theater is you walk in off the street, go directly into an elevator, and go down 2 floors.
So it feels like you're descending.
2 floors. It's like a site-specific for this play. It's a terrific venue. But just the experience that the audience will go down 2 levels below grade to see this play was very, very exciting for me.
You could have done it just at the York Theater and turned their air conditioner off. You would have had the same sort of experience.
That's true. You can find some pretty sketchy spaces, but this is actually...
No, the York spaces, I'm just joking, because you have to go down like 3 staircases to get to the York Theater. They do those musicals. It's a wonderful company. But I imagine if the air conditioner's off, it feels pretty... Yeah, it was just a joke. Anywho, we're talking...
There are a lot of theaters like that, though. Rattlestick Theater in Manhattan, you have to actually walk across the stage to get to a bathroom. Unless they fixed that, I don't know if they have.
Well, do you remember the One Dream Theater? That used to be downtown. It was an off-Broadway theater called the One Dream Theater. Had that difficulty, as did the original location of Irish Rep. Before they got out of 22nd Street thing, their bathroom was right there.
You had to plan your trips to the bathroom very carefully.
We're talking with Lee Blessing here on Dave's Gone By about his new play, of course, which is A User's Guide to Hell, featuring Bernard Madoff. But let's roll it back, it'd be 25, 30 years almost already, to the play that really made your name, in a way. The one that got the Tony nomination, the one that got the Pulitzer, A Walk in the Woods. Did that feel somehow different from the other pieces that you were writing? Is there a reason, besides it being a good play, that suddenly became your calling card for the next 20, 30 years?
Well, there are a lot of aspects of that production. And let me clarify, it was nominated for a Tony, it was a finalist for the Pulitzer, did not win either of those awards.
Right, yeah.
It was also a finalist or nominee for the Olivier Award in London, actually, in its British production. So it was, obviously extremely well received, and there were some odd things about it. It was, for example, a Broadway show. It was the first play I ever had produced in New York, which is a very odd thing. One does not normally start at the top, in that way, in terms of New York production. So that alone made it highly unusual. The play worked then. It's always worked. It's a strong two-character play written in the 80s about nuclear arms negotiation. At sort of the height of a lot of fear that people had during the time of the Reagan administration, when both the United States and the Soviet Union, then Soviet Union, were rattling sabers a good deal. People were very nervous about all these nuclear arms that were poised and pointed at each other's countries, and we were mostly worried about an accident, something that would accidentally set off a nuclear exchange.
Right. A flock of seagulls, yeah.
But it's interesting to me that the play continues to be done all the time, and I think that's because the problem, in a sense, is chronic. You invent a weapon, you can't uninvent it. And, while we do seek to control the proliferation of nuclear weapons, we're not very successful at that.
We can't even control poison gas at the moment, so,
Yeah, sure. North Koreans and Iranians, etc., there are all sorts, about 13 countries now have nuclear capabilities. Maybe it's only 10, but it's still a significantly larger number than we're comfortable with. And frankly, some of the struggles and the entente, the standoff, the nuclear standoff psychology is still going on, say, between Pakistan and in India. One never knows when someone will make a grievous error there and launch something. So we feel that the problem is still around. I have another play called Two Rooms, which was written also in the 80s, and it was the time when Westerners were being kidnapped in Lebanon, and the struggles that people went through. The Reagan administration chose not to negotiate with kidnappers, they said. So Europeans would be released, but Americans weren't. Terry Anderson was held for 5 years. So what I noticed was that after 9/11, that play started being done again a great deal. Because, again, the international problem remained chronic. The unrest in the Middle East, the friction between a lot of Middle Eastern countries and peoples in the Middle East and Western nations has continued. And people will go and see that play, even though it's about issues of the 1980s, and they'll simply do all the plug-ins for what's going on now.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I saw that play not only in New York, but I was at a theater festival. This is going back almost 20 years in Romania, where an small American troupe brought the show there to. This was pre-2001, though. This would have been, as I said, 20 years ago-ish. They did it in English, but the audience pretty much understood what was going on. So,
a number of my plays have sort of that staying power because simply, I think, however well they're written, they happen to be about things we're still very concerned with. Hi, this is Lee Blessing, and I'm talking with Dave on Dave's Gone By at UNC Radio.
You did Walk in the Woods. It got all those nominations. It got you on Broadway. Made your name. Obviously got you an agent and all that cool stuff. The next step after that, in other words, did you feel tremendous pressure about your next play?
No, not really. I mean, I already had an agent. I already, had been getting produced regionally for a number of years before that happened. My base was in Minneapolis, St. Paul. And to me, getting done in New York almost felt like a regional production. It's like, over there, But after that show, after Walk in the Woods on Broadway, I think it was the next year, Eleemosynary was done by Manhattan Theater Club. I had a number of shows out at La Jolla that originated at La Jolla Playhouse. They were all done as commissions for there. And mostly throughout my career, I simply, every year was about writing the next play and getting it done where I could. Throughout the career, I've had shows done at all different levels of theater in America and abroad, and it just sort of continues the same way. Mine has not been that typical playwright's path in New York, where you start at really small places. Somebody finds you. You maybe you do well at a humble venue, then you do a little better somewhere bigger, and you get a Broadway production. Then everybody thinks you're a Broadway playwright. You try to make the next one work on Broadway. Blah blah blah. Yeah. There are people who do that. And they live that dream or nightmare, as it sort of by turns can be.
That's sort of the Terrence McNally mode. They'll shoot for Broadway first. Sometimes, like 20 times he's had shows on Broadway. Also a lot of stuff at MTC and other places. But for you, Broadway is not necessarily the brass ring. It's about getting the plays done.
I've never been that, as my dad used to say mournfully, I've never been that money-oriented. And I think if you're trying to make a real living as a playwright, only a few people ever get to. And those are the people who typically get identified with being, as we like to call them, Broadway playwrights. But that is fast disappearing, and theater itself has changed so much. You don't see new people kind of getting that pattern going very much any longer. I think it's rarer and rarer to see somebody really make a significant living in theater as a playwright.
So if you weren't working, if you weren't running the theater program at Rutgers, you would not really be getting by just on royalties and your work and stuff like that.
Well, I'd be getting by if I lived in a hollow log in Maine.
Hell, why do you think I moved to Colorado, dude?
That's sort of a level of income, and I think every playwright tends to find their way to make it. You find a high percentage of people in theater, especially playwrights, who come from families with some wealth. In a sense, they're free to be playwrights because they don't really need to make a lot of money. The stream of being a working class kid who, because he or she is a very talented playwright, getting somewhere, that's becoming rarer and rarer, I think, that kind of a career.
I mean, not that it was ever common either. But
not that it was ever very common. never know.
It's very funny that the Mint Theater Company off Broadway is doing a play by George Kelly, a lesser-known one, that they're opening in, I guess, a week or two. And the whole theme is there's this young kid, this is taking place in the 1920s, of course, who doesn't want to go into his father's business. He wants to go to New York and be a playwright. And just the idea of it almost sounds absurd in this day and age. I'm sure it was absurd to his dad, but,
Yeah, I remember, I'm trying to remember the name of the movie now, the Jack Nicholson, Diane Keaton movie that takes place out in the Hamptons. He has a heart trouble, and they get together. She dates Keanu Reeves for a while in the movie, and then eventually ends up with Jack. It's all very believable. And but my favorite part of it is that she's a playwright.
Oh, okay, I was wondering.
In his Hampton mansion, and 5 feet from the water, and I'm thinking, well,
sure, yeah.
Let's not go into, how she earned all that money with playwriting. So I guarantee you, even Nora Ephron was not making much money from her play.
Listen, I was just going to mention Nora Ephron. I was going to say, even she, but then again, she lived in New York, so she had to pay New York prices for everything. So she couldn't have afforded the Hamptons pied-à-terre.
No, she made her money in other forms. You don't make a great deal of money from being a playwright.
Here's the thing that also I did find surprising when I checked your creds, as it were, on the Internet Movie Database, IMDb. There weren't that many. And that's a bit of the surprise, that when Walk in the Woods made your name, you didn't jump to the West Coast, or your agent didn't push you to say, yeah, sure, go ahead, write plays. But, write for this television show. You did one episode of Homicide. Here's a sitcom that needs or did you? Or did you write any movies?
No, I was, as I say, I was in the Twin Cities, with a wife and family for most of those years. And it was pretty awkward to try to relocate. When I finally did come out and do a little work in LA, I did, some episodes, open assignment episodes on 2 or 3 hour-long series. That was all well and good, but my emphasis personal emphasis has always been writing plays. Some playwrights really take to writing television and film, and others don't.
Well, Teresa Rebeck obviously is
a great example of someone who just never connected to writing for film and TV. I think, sadly, certainly the last 20-25 years, the pattern has been to get yourself a play that's noted and written about in a successful, hopefully, New York production, at whatever level, Broadway, major off-Broadway, second-tier off-Broadway, but enough to get you noticed and get you, to get you that agent if you don't already have one, and then use that simply as the stepping stone to get your ass out to LA and start working in TV. And really what's happened, I think, in the last 10 or 15 years is that the writing on the best cable series really has become the central dramatic experience that Americans are undergoing these days. We don't automatically think of going to Broadway or off-Broadway to see the next important piece of American dramatic writing. We're as likely to go look at Breaking Bad on AMC or looking at Boardwalk Empire on HBO or something like that.
That's true.
Because so many talented playwrights get a hit play, then get out of the theater and have long careers writing television.
Now, you mentioned before that you're currently married to a fellow playwright and someone who does more TV writing than you do, Melanie Marnich. So a bunch of questions about that, of like, first of all, what's it like being married to another playwright?
I'm sure, just as with actor marriages, sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't work at all. In our case, I think it's worked extremely well, and I felt very, very fortunate. Melanie and I got married about 7 years ago, and so it's my second marriage, it's her first. And what we discovered about each other, well, when we started dating, we started reading each other's plays more. Because we wanted to we knew we couldn't have a serious relationship with a writer whose work we didn't respect. So we had to get that out of the way. And luckily, I love her writing, and she seems to be able to bear mine. And after that difficult point was passed, most of the rest of it has been pretty easy. We don't write together. We don't have any ambition to write together. Mm-hmm. It would be fine if we did or didn't. It's just that it's important that it's well defined. So she has come out here and done since about 2007, I guess, just great work working on series series at HBO and Showtime and AMC. She's just shown a real flair for working in the medium.
That's great. And the other question is, do you show each other your stuff that you're working on? Do you ask for, and not that you're writing together, but is she the first one to see your plays or vice versa? Or do you kind of not share until much later?
No, we do read each other's work, and it's been very comfortable in recent years because the mass of what she's done has been television, and the mass of what I've been doing has been theater. So we're not really competing for the same production opportunities. So right now, for example, she's been writing a pilot for an HBO series and a prospective series. So I've read 2 or 3 drafts of that in the last year. I give her some notes, and she's thankful. I don't give her a lot of notes. She's already getting tons of notes from everybody else in the process. So, but we enjoy each other's writing. So I think it's actually a pretty pleasurable sort of step.
And what about writing routines? Are you a morning person? Do you set aside a certain number of hours every day? Is it inspiration has to strike? What's your routine, and does it differ from your wife's?
Yes, our routines differ completely. She is an extremely disciplined and organized writer. It's probably because she spent 9 years as an advertising copywriter, where she learned a great deal of discipline and how to meet deadlines and all of that. And she tries to get up very early in the morning and work throughout the morning, and a little bit in the afternoon, and then she's done. Whereas I just never know when I'm going to write again. I get to it eventually, and when I do, then I write rather intensely, but it can take a while for me to get to that point where I know what I'm going to do. So I don't sit down unless I really know what I'm going to do.
Are you someone who absolutely needs to have some kind of deadline?
Deadlines can help, I guess.
Even if they're self-imposed, but yeah.
I always feel like my writing schedule is very chaotic, but every year I look back and I've written at least one play. And after 30 years, that's a lot of plays, and nearly every one of them has been produced, and the vast majority of them are published. So clearly I'm doing something well enough,
Yeah.
But I wish I had her habits. It would, I think life works out much better if you have some discipline.
Speaking of disciplines, you're still teaching at Rutgers. Do you teach courses or just running the department, or both, or what?
Actually, I've been, as of last fall, I've been away from Rutgers. And Rutgers and I are slowly parting ways in a completely amicable sort of divorce. I wouldn't even characterize it as a divorce. We're simply, divergent paths now.
Well, let me ask about that. Did you feel like it was sort of time to move on? You were kind of losing the momentum, or just...
No, it wasn't that at all. I was very comfortable and really enjoyed. I ran the graduate playwriting program there, and I truly enjoyed doing that. I loved the department. But Melanie got her first TV job in 2007, and if you're a TV writer, you pretty much live in LA.
Yeah.
The very few shows are written in New York. The vast majority are written in LA, and so you have to sort of be out here. In those periods of time when you're between jobs, you're sitting there in your hiatus, and you sort of have to be here because that's when you take meetings. That's when you're trying to drum up the new work. So all the producers, et cetera, are out here. You have to be available to their schedules. So because of that, she was always here, and I had to start commuting from New York to LA, and I would fly every month, and I did that for 5 years. And I think at that point we just, had enough of that. We wanted to live together. That's why we got married. So I said, well, I'll leave Rutgers, and we'll be out here. So starting last fall, that's kind of been the case.
Do you see yourself teaching on the West Coast or getting involved in academia again, or is now writing fine?
I haven't yet because it's been a very busy writing year, and about a 12 to 14-month period starting last February, I've got 5 different plays world premiering in 5 different theaters. So I've mostly just been running around and writing. But, I think I get back into teaching. I like teaching.
Well, back when you were teaching at Rutgers, the graduate playwriting students, what are a couple of things that you always made sure that you got across to your students that was really important about what they're doing? And also, was there something that you noticed in the decade or more that you were there in the writing that may have changed or was there a certain sort of theme or stream in what young people were writing about, or the style they were using?
Well, I think there are some aspects to the way I think about plays that may feel a little old-fashioned to a lot of people. I believe the plays actually have climaxes, that they get somewhere, that they're designed to do something to us as we watch them. So I talked, I think, a lot while I was teaching to students about knowing where your play is going before you get there, And if you can do that before you start writing, great. If you can't, do it as soon as you can while you're writing a play. Find out the climax of the play and structure the play so it'll take an audience there. But I was struck, I was always fascinated by how many young writers didn't think that plays needed climaxes at all. And I suppose I'd always ask, well, then, it's a 90-minute play. If it doesn't need a climax, it could be a 30-minute play or a 40-minute play. Why?
If it's slice of life is not as interesting as they think it is.
Yeah, it can sort of be a struggle. Obviously, one of the things that's really changed a lot since I started teaching here in 2001 was that audiences are treating plays differently than they used to. They want plays without intermissions. They want plays that run roughly the same amount of time as a movie. They want things to happen and to impact their time as briefly as possible. One of the fascinating things about theater is it's the last dramatic form that isn't completely readily accessible at the convenience of the audience. You still have to go to see a show at 8 o'clock somewhere else, physically. There's nothing on TV or film that you can't access, anytime you want, once it's out. And watch in any sort of way you want. If you want to watch all the episodes of House of Cards in a row, you can. If you want to watch one a month, you can. But with plays, they're on at a certain time and in a certain building, and you have to go there. Yeah. They're doing what they can to push plays to be as brief as possible.
Well, you already.
And also, I think that audiences want things they really rely on. They want to know that there's a star in the show. They want to know that the play's about something they really are thinking about already. Audiences are reshaping theater, even as we speak.
That's a really interesting point from Lee Blessing. Last question, because we got to wrap it up. But I am kind of curious, or maybe one or two more questions. But who are the playwrights that you admire, either as you were first coming up or learning how to write plays in the past? Your favorite playwrights, and then who might be people you recommend now?
Well, it's funny. When I was young, I think in high school and college, undergrad school, I was a great devotee of the European absurdists, Beckett and Chenet and Ionesco and playwrights of that ilk, and I tried to imitate them, and it was always disastrous. But when I got to grad school, I got the advice that maybe, since I was a post-war Midwesterner, I should look at the work of successful Midwestern playwrights like Tennessee Williams and William Inge, people like that, domestic playwrights. Other Americans. I spent more time reading them, and that really helped me find a style that made sense for who I was. That was a key development in my writing, I suppose, at the time. I admire just a whole host of writers. My writing is quite various. I have a lot of plays that are very different from each other, and that's because I admire a lot of different kinds of playwriting and playwrights. So it's really, for me, it's very broad spectrum.
Well, it's been really delightful covering that spectrum with Lee Blessing. Just a reminder, he is the author of A User's Guide to Hell, featuring Bernard Madoff. Project Y Theater Company is staging the piece at the Atlantic Theater Stage 2. That's the place that they have on West 16th Street. Is opening today, September 7th, and running through the month of September. So it just remains for me to wish you, I'm not going to say good luck, I'm going to say Maird or break a written leg. I'm not sure. What do writers say to each other, actually? What would be...
We try not to talk to each other. We're too jealous.
Good point. Oh, thank you ever so much. I'm very grateful that you spent this time with us, Lee Blessing. Best of luck on the plays that you haven't written yet. I think that's fair to say.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Thank you, Dave.